They murdered their mothers, married their siblings, and poisoned their children all for a throne soaked in centuries of blood. The Ptolemaic dynasty wasn't just Egypt's darkest chapter. It was humanity's most depraved family, ruling through incest and assassination for 300 years. They turned Alexandria's golden palaces into slaughterhouses where brothers killed sisters and parents devoured their young. This is the true story of the dynasty that made Game of Thrones look like a children's fairy tale. In 305 BC, Ptolemaic Alexander, the Great's most ruthless general, crowned himself pharaoh of the ancient land. He brought Greek ambition but adopted one Egyptian tradition that would curse his bloodline forever: sibling marriage for purity. What began as political strategy became a grotesque obsession, twisting the family tree into a nightmare of genetic horror. The dynasty's founding father couldn't have known he was planting seeds for 3 centuries of unprecedented familial carnage. Ptolemy II Philadelphus made incest official policy by marrying his full sister in 278 BC, shocking even Greek society. She'd already watched her children murdered in Thrace, returning to Egypt hardened, ambitious, and hungry for absolute power. Together they ruled brilliantly but suspiciously, knowing that in their world, today's lover could be tomorrow's poisoner at dinner. The Ptolemaic court became a deadly game where family members were both allies and the most dangerous enemies imaginable. By the 3rd generation, the dynasty had perfected the art of familial murder as routine governance and political necessity. Ptolemy III, Euergetes, started promising, but his son Ptolemy IV Philopator became a monster who murdered his own mother Bernice. He slaughtered his uncle, his brother, and anyone who threatened him, spending his days in drunken orgies while Egypt burned. His minister Eusebius orchestrated mass executions, and the palace became a labyrinth where family members vanished without a trace. Ptolemy Epiphanes inherited the throne as a terrified child after his mother Arsinoe III was poisoned by court officials. He grew up surrounded by assassins, never knowing if his food was poisoned or his servants were secretly hired killers. Rebellions tore Egypt apart as foreign powers sensed weakness, circling like predators around a dying animal's helpless, struggling body. The boy king became a paranoid man who saw enemies in every shadow, and often his paranoia was absolutely justified. Then came the war between brothers that would define the dynasty's descent into complete, irreversible madness and depravity. Ptolemy VI Philometor and Ptolemy VIII, Euergetes II, siblings who should have been allies, became mortal enemies in brutal civil war. Ptolemy VIII was massively obese, earning the name Phaiskin, the bloated one, but his physical grotesqueness paled before his monstrous cruelty. He murdered his teenage nephew Ptolemy VII in cold blood, a boy whose only crime was existing as potential competition. Ptolemy VIII's family arrangements defied all boundaries of decency, morality, and even the dynasty's already twisted standards of behavior. He married his sister Cleopatra II, then seduced and married her daughter Cleopatra III, making himself husband to both women. Mother and daughter became rival wives to the same grotesque man, their hatred for each other matched only by loathing him. When Cleopatra II finally rebelled, the resulting civil war lasted 15 years and turned Alexandria's streets into rivers of blood. The bloated king's revenge against his sister wife Cleopatra II reached depths of evil that shocked even that hardened, brutal ancient world. He had their 12-year-old son, Ptolemy Memphites, murdered, then personally dismembered the boy's body with methodical, sadistic precision and care. The child's severed limbs and organs were packed in a decorative chest and delivered to Cleopatra on her birthday celebration. Her screams when opening that gift echoed through history as the moment the dynasty's last shred of humanity died forever. After Ptolemy VIII's death, the throne became a revolving door of incompetent, paranoid rulers, destroying what little remained of Egypt. Brothers Ptolemy IX and Ptolemy X fought for decades, each expelling the other, returning, murdering supporters, and fleeing again. Egypt became a joke among Mediterranean powers, its once feared military now a rabble, its treasury looted by its own kings. Rome watched with calculating patience, waiting for the perfect moment to sweep in and claim the dying kingdom as prey. Ptolemy, the 12th Orlitz, the flute player, was so weak and despised that his own subjects rioted and expelled him from Egypt. He crawled to Rome, begging for military intervention, bribing senators with Egypt's dwindling wealth to buy back his own throne. Rome restored him with legions who occupied Alexandria, turning Egypt into a client state in all but official Roman name. He ruled as a puppet king, despised by his people, controlled by Rome, the living embodiment of dynastic failure complete. In 51 BC, Olitz died, leaving the crumbling throne to his brilliant 18-year-old daughter Cleopatra and her child brother Ptolemy XIII. Forced to marry by tradition, the siblings immediately began plotting each other's deaths with murderous intensity and teenage desperation combined. Cleopatra was cunning and desperate, understanding that Egypt's survival depended on manipulating Rome's civil war to her strategic advantage. Her brother's advisors drove her into exile, but she would return with history's most powerful man at her commanding side. Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria pursuing his rival Pompey, finding himself caught in the royal siblings' deadly, escalating power struggle. Cleopatra had herself smuggled past guards rolled inside a carpet, emerging before Caesar in a legendary display of dramatic courage. She seduced him with intelligence and desperation, offering Egypt's ancient wealth in exchange for Roman legions to crush her brother. Together, they waged war. Ptolemy XIII drowned fleeing the Battle of the Nile, his golden armor dragging him beneath dark waters. Cleopatra ruled briefly with another young brother, Ptolemy XIV, whom she almost certainly poisoned to secure her son Caesarion's position. She lived openly as Caesar's mistress in Rome until the Ides of March 44 BC, when conspirators butchered him. Caesar's assassination forced her to flee back to Egypt, pregnant with his child, knowing Rome's civil war would determine her fate. She consolidated power ruthlessly, eliminating rivals, preparing for the inevitable moment when Rome's armies would come knocking again, demanding submission. Mark Antony, Caesar's avenger and Rome's most powerful general after Philip, summoned Cleopatra to Tarsus to answer for her loyalties. She arrived on a golden barge dressed as Venus incarnate, surrounded by perfume, silk, music, and calculated theatrical magnificence. Antony fell completely under her spell, abandoning his Roman wife Octavia and his political duties for Egyptian luxury and passion. Their love affair was real, but also strategic, a desperate alliance against Octavian, Caesar's heir, who wanted them both destroyed absolutely. Antony and Cleopatra declared themselves living gods, divine rulers of an Eastern empire that would challenge Rome's Western dominance. They had 3 children and lived in legendary luxury, hosting feasts where pearls dissolved in wine and excess knew no bounds. But Octavian waged brilliant propaganda war in Rome, painting them as traitors, barbarians, and threats to Roman civilization itself. Rome declared war specifically on Cleopatra, the foreign seductress who had supposedly enslaved Rome's once great general with Oriental witchcraft. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC shattered their dreams, when Octavian's fleet surrounded and decimated their combined naval forces. Cleopatra's ships fled mid-battle in panico, strategisti still debase, and Antony abandoned his men to follow her in love. They retreated to Alexandria, knowing Octavian would pursue them relentlessly, that their defeat was inevitable, their deaths merely a question of timing. They founded a club called Those Who Will Die Together, spending final months in desperate pleasure, defiant excess, and grim acceptance. When Octavian's armies reached Alexandria's gates in 30 BC, Antony received false intelligence that Cleopatra had committed suicide in despair. Following Roman tradition, he fell on his sword, but the blade struck wrong, leaving him bleeding and dying slowly in agony. He was carried to Cleopatra's monument where she had barricaded herself, refusing to open doors, terrified of capture and humiliation. Servants hoisted his dying body through an upper window. He died in her arms, as blood pooled on marble floors. Cleopatra attempted negotiating with Octavian, even trying to seduce Rome's new master as she had Caesar and Antony before successfully. But Octavian was cold, calculating, and completely immune to her legendary charms, interested only in parading her as captive trophy. Realizing she would be dragged through Rome in chains, exhibited as conquered barbarian queen, Cleopatra chose death over humiliation. On August 12th, 30 BC, she dressed in full royal regalia and arranged her suicide with characteristic dramatic precision and flair. Servants found her dead on her golden couch, crown perfectly positioned, 2 loyal handmaids dead beside her, an eternal final service. Whether an asp smuggled in figs or poison she'd prepared years earlier, killed her remains one of history's most enduring mysteries. Octavian had Caesarion, her son, with Caesar and Egypt's last legitimate pharaoh, hunted down and murdered to eliminate all rival claims. With the 17-year-old boy's execution, the Ptolemaic dynasty ended after 275 years of incest, murder, betrayal, and unmatched horror. Egypt became a Roman province, its independence extinguished forever, its temples falling silent as ancient gods faded into forgotten memory. The dynasty that began with Alexander's general ended with a woman who tried seducing Rome itself and failed spectacularly, fatally. The Ptolemies ruled through poison, assassination, incest, and civil war, creating a legacy of depravity unmatched in human civilization. Their story remains history's darkest testament. Absolute power, Dazantius corrupted, transforms families into monsters who devour their own young.